Welcome to the Pull Bag. Join us as we dig out our latest comics and discuss them with the rotating panel of the GCRN crew. So sit back and enjoy this week's Pull Bag.
Hello and welcome to the Pull Bag. This is episode 384. I am TFG1Mike. Joining me is Steve Megatron. The last time you were on, we did one of our chapters on Batman The Adventures Continue. So there is that. Hello, sir. How are you?
Hey-o. I'm doing well there, Michael. I think we're about due for another Batman run-in.
Oh, yes, very soon. Very, very soon. It's going to be a Christmas of Bats or a Christmas with the Joker or something. We're here to do Origins, and you guys might be wondering, who's the guest? We're the guests on our own show. So I will put this link in the show notes. Way back when, 7 years ago or so, Steve and I recorded episode 3 of this podcast where we debuted the Pull Bag Origins, where we talk about how people got into or out of comics and how, what their reading habits are and whatever else. So I've been on a podcast retirement for the past, or semi-retirement for the past 8-9 months since my computer is in storage. That is being rectified soon. Hopefully by Halloween, I will have my stuff back and everything else. So, but while I've been on hiatus, I'm like, I should do something with the Pull Bag Origins. I should reformat it. I should figure out what questions and how many questions and whatever. So I came up with a bunch of questions. I had a bunch of other people come up with some questions that I could add in here and whatever else. And we ended up with 25 questions. It's a nice odd number. I wish it was an even number, but it's an odd number, and that's fine. So I figured we've been doing this new series starting in episode 381 with my buddy Jeremy Fine. Episode 382 was John and Maggie from the Rod Pod and Married with Comics. Go check them out. And episode 383 was Edward and Kendra Hale, who do a bunch of stuff with Dark Knight News, DC Comics News, and a bunch of other things. And I figured, let's have some fun and let's have us, answer the questions and see what kind of conversation we can come out of it. So that's what's going on tonight. The first question, did you grow up reading comics, and at what age did you first remember reading or noticing comics? Megatron first.
Well, I can't remember exactly what year. I want to say it was like 5 or 6. We used to get them from the local drugstore.
Yep.
Which was initially how my dad got me into them. I think we were up there for something else, and he's like, "Hey, why don't you come over here and look at these comics?" And it was, I got a couple of G.I. Joe, got like an X-Men, got a Nightfall Batman comic. And those were dark.
Yes, they are.
Especially for that age. I was like, to begin with, I was like, these are not very much fun. And then I think I got one of the animated series ones around that time. Either that or my mom found them and ordered them. Because, those were back in the days when you could have subscriptions and have them delivered in the mail to your house.
Yes.
And so I did. I had comics that were brought every month. I had G.I. Joe, I had Batman the Animated Series, and I had the regular Batman line that would show up in the mail every month. And I thoroughly enjoyed them.
Yes. For me, I knew of comic books, but I was more of the animation side, and I am 6 years older than Steve. So being born in 1980 versus 1986, Yeah, when I was 6, 7, 8, 9 years old, it was all about animation and cartoons and action figures and toys and all of that. I knew about comics. I knew where the Batman 66 television show came from. I knew where the animated versions came from at the time. Like, you know, Adventures of Batman and not Adventures of Batman and Robin. What the hell is the name of that damn show? The old Batman show. Anyway, the old animated cartoons. Anyway,
Super
the ones
Friends.
where they had him. Yeah, there you go. The ones where they had him cross over with Scooby-Doo at one point or another. So I remember all of that. I remember in the 90s when I was like 91, 92, 11 or 12, I would do the drugstore thing like you said. I would also go there wasn't nothing more special than going into a Walden Books and spinning that spinner rack. And I remember, I think the first comic I got was from a Walden Books, and it was like a middle part of some Spider-Man story that was going on at the time. I think it had something, not necessarily the Clone Saga, but it had something to do with either Mysterio or Rhino or something. But I remember around that time, obviously, 94 was when Spider-Man, the animated series, came out for Fox Kids. So, and I had kind of read here and there. I had read one of those Batman Dark Stories like you did. I don't remember which one it was. I have no clue. My mom found it at some flea market or something. That's the other thing. You used to be able to find comics at the flea market or garage sales or yard sales or whatever kind of thing.
Well,
Not necessarily.
You also used to be able to go to comic shops and they had the quarter bin.
Yep.
Just tons and tons of comics in the quarter bin, and that's how I started collecting Transformers. Was I found some of them in the regular area, but there were some that they had so many of them, or they were in bad shape, or just not pristine shape enough to sell for the regular pricing. And then they had them in the quarter bin, and I just stocked up.
Mm-hmm. Yep. All right, next question. As a kid, was there a parent friend who just said, here, kid, read this comic, go away, you bother me kind of thing? We've kind of already answered this, but still have to ask it. I would assume for both of us it's our parents.
Oh, yeah, totally.
My mom, your mom, that kind of thing.
Yeah, my dad's the one that initially sparked it, and then my mom kind of enabled it.
There you go. When we were kids, which characters were our favorites?
As far as comics, I always liked Batman, and I liked the Riddler.
I hear they talk to each other on Waze now.
They do. They complain about each other, and it's quite humorous. I used Batman on Waze to get me back home from the airport after dropping my family off.
There you go. For me, it's pretty much Batman and Spider-Man, because when I was a kid, I was all about Batman. Especially, you were only 3 years old at the time, but when that movie came out in '89, people can say, and we've said plenty on the GCRN about Batman '89. People can say what they want to about whether that movie holds up now or not, but back then, when that was literally the comic book movie that started this whole revolution that we are currently living in, it was just seeing that trailer, seeing those promos, seeing the movie. Like, I remember that movie so vividly. And I didn't even get to see it in theaters, but I got to see it on VHS and everything else. And it's so funny because after its theatrical run, both Sears and JCPenney would have it running every Christmas for like 2 years, from 90 to 92. I remember anytime during Christmas time after Thanksgiving, you'd go into like the electronics portion of the store or wherever they had TVs in Sears or JCPenney, because JCPenney always had a kids section. Please edit that. So JCPenney always had a kids section, and I would just sit there while my mom shopped, and I would just watch Batman '89 whole time. So that movie really was game changer for me. And then Spider-Man, it's Spider-Man. It's a kid in a costume who has to live up to this responsibility he has, and he has to use, with great power comes great responsibility. So I was never into the Transformers stuff as a kid. I never read the Marvel US or UK run because Transformers to me was the cartoon. Same thing with Turtles. I never got into Turtles when I was a kid until the cartoon, and then obviously much later with the IDW stuff. So there's that. All right, next question. DC or Marvel? The age-old question.
I would have to say DC.
For me, it's... Since starting the podcast and since getting into comics full-time, it hasn't really been about the companies. It's been about characters. So, like, if DC has a Batman Beyond story or series that I want to read, I'll read that. If DC has a He-Man story or a Thundercat story or whatever story, same thing with Marvel. If Marvel has a Spider-Man arc that I want to read, I'll read that. If they have an Iron Man story, I'll read that kind of thing. But if I really do have to choose, I'm probably going to say DC as well, because I've really dug what a lot of the DC writers and artists have done within the New 52 and even Rebirth as well. I haven't read very much Rebirth, but I'm going to rectify that soon, so there's that. Next question. What other publishers do you enjoy reading? So IDW, Dark Horse, Dynamite, Zenoscope. I'm trying to think. So publish Lion Forge. I read a lot of other publishers. Image Comics. Image Comics has got some great stuff.
I've read a little bit of Image. I've read a little bit of I've read a little bit of Dark Horse in the past, but I've pretty much been an IDW guy since for a while, because they actually hold all of the properties I care about: Star Trek, Transformers, right. G.I. Joe. So I mean, honestly, they're really my only go-to.
Mm-hmm. What I find is so interesting about Image Comics and Dark Horse and others is that, with Image specifically, there's multiple series in there that I absolutely love, that kind of thing. So, and I bet you're right. IDW is kind of where the whole licensed character, all the franchises we love kind of stand and are. So that's pretty much the same for me. Next up is print comics, digital comics. Which one, both, either or, and why?
I'm kind of torn on this because I like digital in the sense that I can read them anywhere. I don't have to bring them with me, and they don't take up any space. However, I prefer to have them in my hand, especially if I'm paying that money. I prefer to actually have them with me. There's a difference when you're reading it in person or when you're I don't know. I like the texture of it on my hands. I like being able to read it, and I like being able to have the art in my hand as opposed to on the computer, which, I mean, yeah, I save a lot of the art stuff on the computer, but it doesn't, I don't know, it's not the same.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
For me, I started out in print when I started reading way back in 2013. As I've mentioned before, this is all Steve's fault because he's like, ooh, Batman number 13 of New 52 starts Death of the Family, and it's the Joker face, or the Joker's not face, or the Joker whatever face he does or doesn't have. So I started pretty heavy on print, and I didn't have 17 different long boxes, but I had a good print collection. And then one thing absolutely killed me on print. Never try to read an omnibus all at the same time. This is the trades where it's 12 issues in one thing, and it's yay thick, and it's literally, I was reading Punisher Welcome Back Frank for recording one of our Punisher Month episodes back in 2013, and not because of the comic, but because of the weight of the comic, I literally was falling asleep, and the book fell out of my hand on the floor. And I'm like, okay, no. And I know that our good friend Lady Rec, Amy, she had been doing the underbase for Moonbase 2, which is their version of the comic show that they did for Transformers. So I had been listening to that at the time, and she kept talking about Comixology and Guided View and this, that, and the other thing, and I'm like, what the heck is this? So I finally went and looked at Comixology, and I'm like, ooh, Guided View. Ooh, storyboard. Ooh, I love this. So I am firmly in the digital realm when I want to read comics, when I want to read the story, when I want to see the art. I'm locked into digital. There's just no ifs, ands, or buts about it. However, I would love to have a print collection of, say, the IDW TMNT run, in their hardcover collection books that they do, that kind of thing. But for me, reading them, I have to read them digitally because I read them on my computer. Okay, next question. Who are some of your favorite comics writers and why?
I don't know if I can actually name any writers, specifically. Because honestly, I don't really pay attention to that. Although I would say Paul Dini would probably be one of them.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, I guess in that instance, but I don't, again, really pay attention to all that.
Mm-hmm. For me, there's a lot. There's a whole list. Kyle Higgins, who did the New 52 run of Nightwing. He's done Power Rangers with Shattered Grid in the first 31 or so issues of Power Rangers. Scott Snyder, who did the Batman New 52 run. Dan Jurgens, who is currently doing the Batman Beyond run, which sadly is coming to an end, which sucks, but it is what it is. There's just so many writers, and why I like the writers that I like is because they're Kyle Higgins specifically. Between him and Gail Simone on New 52, she was on Batgirl, he was on Nightwing. Those stories just grabbed me because I love those characters. And the way that Kyle wrote Dick Grayson Nightwing, I felt was very animated series, kind of, but it still told its own story. But since he grew up on the Batman the Animated Series and the DCAU like we did, that was his influence kind of thing, and the stories that he told with Nightwing were really great. With Gail Simone and Batgirl, really, really good psychological stuff there. Very, very fun. So, yeah, and then there are a lot of others. Tom Zoller, absolutely love his stuff. He did Love and Capes. He's done Long Distance. He's done Warning Label. He's done Cupid's Arrows, a bunch of really, really cool, fun romance comic type stuff. There's so many writers, and I actually it's funny, I'm glad I'm talking about this now because I'd forget about it. I actually forgot about it when we recorded episode 375 of Altered Geek, which no one will ever hear because, anyway. So, I'm basically poor. I have to be, sadly, because I can't do a physical job, and I was born disabled with cerebral palsy, and I was born with brain damage, so I'm on supplemental security income. And in order to be on that program, you cannot have any other financial resources. That's the whole point. If you need the program. Anyway, so it's very rare that I get a chance to back Kickstarter projects or whatever else. And what I've said to Karen was, okay, well, I'll unsubscribe from Disney Plus for a month so I can use that money towards this thing. So I'll kind of pick and choose kind of thing. So that way I'm not adding to, the bills and the money spending kind of thing. So I backed Jimmy Palmiotti and Dave Johnson's Pop Kill on Kickstarter. It's basically what if two former Siamese twins who are now separated ran the two biggest cola companies in the world. It's basically the cola wars of the 90s, but in a whole new setting kind of thing. And I'm like, ooh, I have to check this out. And I cannot wait to cover this on this podcast at some point. But Pop Kill, Jimmy Palmiotti, Dave Johnson. I don't remember the artists off the top of my head. I'm sorry. But reading that makes me want to go check out all the other stuff Jimmy Palmiotti has done. And one of the things I'd been meaning to check out on this for the Pull Bag was the Batwing run that he did with Justin Gray, which was done in the New 52, where he took over at Volume 4, where Luke Fox became Batwing. So, yeah, there's just so many writers out there and just so many good stories being told. There are a couple stinkers, but you know what? You focus on what you enjoy and you go from there. All right. What defines a good story to you?
Something that is kind of inclusive of itself, meaning that it's not diving over into 3 other or 4 other different series. Something that's kind of self-inclusive in its own series that it's going in on. But also something that it has... Like, for instance, I've enjoyed miniseries, like 6-part miniseries, because usually you get like a nice little bookended story, but I like where they also leave it open for future type stuff. And when I say that, I mean, like, I collected like Marvel Comics, I collected as far as like Transformers, and I collected Dreamwave Transformers comics, and some of those were some of my favorite comic books. And I'm not saying that I disliked IDW's run, because I haven't read enough of it to really know, but I did enjoy like some of the limited run stuff. Like, I liked the Spotlights. It was a one-off. You got kind of a flavor of the characters. I liked the Beast Wars comics that came out, albeit there was only 2 miniseries and it was brief. But I enjoyed those. They were something I found entertaining, and it was touching on different parts of the fandom that I was familiar with. And I guess part of it is like good storytelling and coming up with a new inventive way of playing within the playground that you've been given. Not that it has to conform to continuity as far as with the comics, because like the Beast Wars, they, for instance, made it fit in between like the season 2 and 3 aspect, and kind of made it work in that instance. But again, it doesn't have to do that. But I enjoyed like even the Marvel stuff, where it was kind of, a lot of it was one-offs, and then some of it was like it touched on the overarching story, but it did gradually build across the entire Marvel run, even if some of the issues didn't necessarily relate. There were aspects that could be related. So, so those aspects, or even like the current run of the Batman animated series continues line, where they're kind of picking up where the series left off and kind of continuing some of the missing plot threads that weren't necessarily remembered in the series or brought up.
Yeah, absolutely. For me, what defines a good story is something that isn't just the same old, something that, like, I can not necessarily look at, because this will come in the next question. Like, when I see a comic cover, whether it's a single issue or a trade, and, most comic covers will have, like, splash writing on them, like, Nightwing in danger, hung up by Prankster or whatever kind of thing. Like they'll have some sort of something to grab you on the cover. And I think for me, what defines a good story is that you can bring in a new audience as well as paint, like if there's something that shows up that is just a complete nerdgasm reference to something you already know. It's so funny. Like one of the My Little Pony comics that Nicole and I, Beatles Diva and I had covered a couple of years ago on the show. One of them had an Optimus Prime doll in the background. And I'm like, okay, I know it's IDW, but that's just funny. You know, that kind of thing. But as far as the good story, it's like if it draws you in and if it makes you want to read it more than once, if it's an element that you haven't learned before, if it's something that changes the character so dramatically, whether you like it or not, it's still good writing to you because it's taking you out of your comfort zone kind of thing. So, yeah. All right. What does the story have to draw you in?
Does the story have to have in it?
Yeah, like what does the story have to draw you in? Like, is there? Like, this kind of goes back to what I was saying about like the cover of the book. Like, if they're like, say you're in a comic, I don't want to say grocery store because they're not in grocery stores anymore, I don't think. But say you walk into the comic shop and you see Kevin Conroy Batman fighting Beast Wars Megatron, and you only see like what it says there. You don't actually see that. You don't notice their images on the cover of the book. So what does the story have to draw you in? Like sometimes we only read one or two issues and then we never read it again, or we read a whole trade and it's like, I need more of this now. Like I want to go spend all this money to have this entire run kind of a thing.
I would say that it would have to have certain characters that I know are going to be in it, as well as, honestly, cover art. Cover art is like one of those big things that will automatically draw me in.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Who are some of your favorite comics artists?
And nothing I will remember.
I
remember like anybody that's done the Transformers stuff, I've been pretty solid into.
Mm-hmm.
So like those automatically get my attention. Like Burcham and oh man, I forget who did it. Don Figueroa.
Don Figueroa, yep.
Yep. So like those ones generally draw me in pretty well. I'm not as familiar with some of the modern artists that are involved with like Transformers. I will say the people that are doing the Star Trek comics and the Transformers stuff though are doing a bang up job. I don't know who they are, which is almost kind of blasphemous as far as comics are concerned. But in the grand scheme of things, they're doing such a good job that I'm not focusing on them. I'm focusing on their art, and I'm enjoying it. So I guess it's a testament that, although I may not know them by name, I enjoy what they've done.
Where to begin? I would say only because right now, as we recorded this, he just shared another one of his upcoming variant covers. Livio Ramondelli is a Transformers art god when it comes to covers. Love Livio's stuff. Alex Milne, who has done some Transformers stuff, a lot of the Phase 2 stuff for More Than Meets the Eye. Alex Gardner from Batgirl, who did some Batgirl stuff for covers and things like that. Kei Zama, who did some of the last, she's got some great art on some of the last Transformer stuff before the universe ended. Pretty much all of the TMNT artists that have done stuff, Dave Wachter, Dan Duncan, Ben Bishop, Love all of their stuff, and they're like you said, there's so many. And sadly, I'm not at I don't have my computer right now to actually go through a whole list of the ones, but just absolutely love the art and comics. Do you have a favorite non-superhero title?
Well, I'd have to say Star Trek.
There you go.
Or Transformers.
Yeah, for me, it's... I'm trying to think. It changes all the time, but I'd say in recent memory, I Hate Fairyland by Scotty Young. Oh, that's such a good title. Sadly, it came to an end, but it was really, really good title. What is your favorite run of a series? So, like, is there a certain, like, Court of Owls, the first arc for Scott Snyder, that kind of thing? So, do you have a favorite run of a series of comics?
Well, like I said, I enjoyed the Beast Wars run from IDW, both of them, the Ascending and the Ascension.
Yeah.
Probably some of my favorite ones, considering they didn't really focus on the core Beast Wars cast. Although they focused on the fact they have to mop up Megatron's mess, and they still failed. But no, I have also enjoyed the various miniseries of the Transformers vs. G.I. Joe. Mm-hmm. Which we've been getting those since the 80s, when G.I. Joe basically introduced Transformers. And then, what was the other thing? I've enjoyed some of the trades of, like, the old Star Trek stuff from DC. Like, I have the Ashes of Eden, or I have, I used to have a lot of the other trades, but I enjoyed a lot of that run because DC's Star Trek comics, at least their original series ones, took place in the movie universe. So they took place in a lot of the underlying time periods. And right. they had some pretty good issues. Like, they had one where Kirk got trapped back in time, and he basically lived out the rest of his life on this planet, and he died there, and they ended up taking the Enterprise on a time travel trip to rescue the captain, so he didn't have to die there. But in the process, somehow, because, you know, temporal mechanics and Star Trek and writing, and sometimes they don't have to make sense, Kirk had made a memorial with a giant Starfleet emblem out of colored rocks on the ground.
Oh wow!
So it was a beautiful issue. So I again, like, a lot of those old comics still ring true to me. But I also enjoyed the Nightfall saga from the Batman comics, because you get to see the fall of Batman and the rise of Batman again by the end of it.
Yep. Absolutely. All right. For me, favorite run of a series, there are so many. But I have to say that probably still to this day, my favorite run was Nightwing issue 19 to 24 or 26. I forget which one. New 52 Nightwing, written by Kyle Higgins, issue 19 to 24 or 25 or 26. So 25 was the rebirth, not rebirth, was the 0 year issue. But basically, when Kyle took Nightwing to Chicago, absolutely love that. That was a really, really interesting run. So very, very cool. What is the one comic you can read over and over again, single issue or trade?
Issue. I don't know. I haven't really read anything over and over. I still have some comics, and they're in my bin here, but I haven't really gone back and read any of them recently.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know.
For me, there are multiples. The number one thing I can think that I've read over and over and over again was the entirety of Tom Zoller's Long Distance. All 4 issues of that series I have in a physical copy trade that I bought from Tom for Karen for her birthday, I think a couple of years ago. And I had him dedicate it to her. I had him write a little dedication in the opening flap of the book to her. But before I had met her, I had read that comic. Like, anytime I need to look at, a fun relationship or, the kind of geeky relationship thing, Long Distance from Tom Zoller is really where I go. And I've got other ones that what's another one? Pretty much any of Kyle Higgins's Power Rangers stuff or the New 52 Nightwing. But yeah, Tom Zoller's Long Distance is probably the one I've done over and over again. So even though, we try to be as positive as we can, we also have to have a few negative questions in here. Are there any comics you avoid altogether?
I usually stay away from the unknowns, and I know that's sacrilege, but it's more so, and anymore I stay away from DC and Marvel. More so because I haven't really enjoyed any of their runs in years, and I've enjoyed, the Batman Continues, I enjoy that.
Yeah.
But other than that, I stay away from DC. Because I find their main storylines are very convoluted between multiple lines, and it's very diluted to the point where I feel like they're strong-arming you into purchasing multiple lineups just to understand the story. And
right.
Marvel's kind of guilty of that too. So I pretty much stay away from those two, and I gear more towards the items that IDW has in play at this moment.
Mm-hmm. But you'll still take it. Like, if I sit here and tell you, okay, look, just take a look at this, and if it grabs your, like, if I sit here and send you Pop Kill, check it out, look at it. If you like it, great. If not, whatever. So you're not closed-minded to having.
No, and we've reviewed some comics before that we kind of decided that weren't for us, and
yeah.
But we still gave it a shot. We read a couple issues, and it just didn't gravitate towards our tastes, and so we moved on.
Yep, absolutely. Comics that I avoid, that I just generally have no interest in because they're not in my wheelhouse. The Walking Dead is a perfect example. I'm not into zombies at all. It has nothing to do with how good or whatever the comic is. Nothing to do with anything. I'm just not a zombie person, so I avoid that. I don't know. It just depends on. Most of the time when I'm looking at comics, I'm seeking out the stuff that I really want to read. I'm not looking at every single solicitation to see if there's something new that I may or may not like. So the next question is kind of loaded. Are there any comics in the past or currently that you wish you had not read them?
Not read.
Yeah, like you had read them and you're like, man, I wish I could get the last 10 minutes back.
I can't think of any off the top of my head. I know there have been some, though.
Yeah.
I can't fathom them at the moment.
Yeah. I think for me, it's more of, to answer this question, it's more of, I'm just not enjoying this. Like, I'm trying to, like we were saying a minute ago about something new that we hadn't read before, or something that isn't fully established, that kind of thing yet, or whatever, or it's from someone completely unknown to us. Like, there are plenty of probably Frank Miller things, and I have not read a lot of Frank Miller, but I'm just using him as an example. There's plenty of Frank Miller things that I may or may not like, but but like you were saying earlier about your hesitation to the unknown, if I read something that's unknown to me and I end up not liking it, it's like, oh God, I wish I could take that time back now. This is going to be a pretty fast question here. How large or small is your physical comic book collection? This question is usually reserved for guests that actually have multiple long boxes of comics in their apartments or homes or whatever.
I have half a short box still.
There you go.
And it consists of, had I remembered that this question was a part of it, I would have left them out. I have the Beast Wars comics. I have my Dreamwave comics of the G1 line.
Right.
I think I have the Rebirth Batman comic.
Okay.
And I'm actually trying to dig them out. And I'm trying to think what else I got. I think I got the Transformers the movie IDW comic.
Uh-huh. I know what other IDW comic you have. You went out and bought like 7 copies of it.
Oh, yes, I do.
TMNT number 55 from IDW.
Yes, with yeah,
My quote.
with Blanchard's quote on it.
That's right. And with Geekcast Radio used as the quoter. Still need a copy of that. Anyway.
Yeah, here we go. I found them. I thought I had more than that.
What do you have?
Well, I actually have less comics than what I thought, so I must have got rid of some. I have the Transformers Universe comics from 3H Productions.
Oh, cool.
With Furman and Kana, and yeah, so I have the issue 1. I paid so much for these, because they were for the 20th anniversary year. So I got the Wreckers one. I got the Timelines Dawn of Future Past.
Yep.
Which is the prequel to Beast Wars, and it's I have the Beast Wars Ascending. I have Star Trek Ashes of Eden. I never did get the other Beast Wars, the Ascension, or no, the Gathering. The Gathering was the first one. I got rid of all of them, I think, because I was trying to get the trade.
Ah, yes.
And I never got around to getting the trade. I'm going to have to fix that. There's comic shops near here. So I'm sure it's cheap now, if you can find it. So
Should be.
If not, I'll Amazon it.
There you go.
But yeah, so I mean, I've got some of those. Some of them I think my oldest comic, though, is literally the Star Trek Ashes of Eden. And it's literally because, one, Shatner wrote it with Judith and Garfield, Reeves Stevens, and then Steve Irwin, Jim Palmiotti.
Jimmy Palmiotti, yeah.
Yes, did the art.
Oh, wow.
Let me open it up. You can hear the book crackle. The glue binding is starting to disintegrate. I'm going to have to fix that. But Steve Irwin did the penciling. The writers were Shatner and the Reeves Stevens. Jimmy Palmiotti did the inking.
Oh, wow.
The Gloria Vasquez did the coloring, and yeah, it's pretty slick. It was written in '95, and it kind of plays out his written book of the same thing, and you get to see, quite honestly, like it's pretty freaking accurate, which is difficult to do with actors.
Right.
And that was something that DC was actually really good at that time. And I bought it because of not only it was kind of Kirk's final hurrah in Starfleet, and then they had a lot of the crew show up, from the original thing. Because it kind of takes place before Generations, where he's on the Enterprise B.
Right.
Because they blow away the Enterprise A.
Of course they do.
It explodes.
Yes, it does.
So yeah, it's a really good issue. I enjoy it, so I might have to review that at some point.
Absolutely.
But yeah, those are what I have.
All right. What's the one comic you could never live without ever? So basically this question is, if the house is on fire, heaven forbid, obviously the family and everybody's safe, but if there was one comic that you had to run back in and save, what would it be?
I don't know, because honestly, I'm pretty sure I could get all of them digitally now. But, so it wouldn't be that big of a loss, but probably the Dawn of Futures Past of the Transformers, because it's a BotCon thing.
Yeah.
And I actually did, because I never went to BotCon at that point. Like, I went to, I think, the last BotCon they had, I want to say.
A year to go?
It wasn't the one with Welker.
Yeah, so that was what, 2015?
Something, because maybe it was. I don't know. 2015, 2016. Yeah, it had to have been 2015 because it
was 2015 because 2016 was in Louisville and you didn't come.
No. Yeah, so it was the second to the last one, but because I saw Michael Wilson, I saw Radio Free Cybertron, and I saw various writers of the Allspark Almanac. Yeah, I didn't go before that, and I had to order it on eBay, the comic, and I bought like multiples.
Very cool. For me, for this question, like you said, my comics are digital. But if I was going, I do still have some physical copies. Like I said earlier, I have the physical copy of Tom Sawler's Long Distance, so that would probably be the one that I would run back in for. What is the most money you spent on a comic or comic item? So this could be a comic book, a trade, an omnibus. Omnibuses are the giant trades. Or a comic item could be a statue, could be an action figure or a bust or something like that.
Well, I don't think I've spent more than $20 on something.
Okay.
Whether it's a figure or a comic. Like comics, I kind of cut the line at like 10.
Right.
It's hard for me to spend even close to that.
Yeah.
But I think the most I've spent is about like 20, 24.
Yeah. For me, it was there are plenty of statues and stuff that I've wanted to buy, but I just never could afford them. I think the most money I spent on a comic was like, I don't know, $11 or something for some variant cover or whatever. May have been $25 for like a multiple variant. Like if you wanted to get all the variant covers, spend $25, that kind of thing. Was there ever a moment when you were done with comics? Like you just didn't want to read them anymore, you had no interest, and you'd rather watch TV or cartoons or whatever?
Much after DC decided they were going to foobar their New 52. That's pretty much when that happened for me. Because the storylines not only started to stink, but I just found them not very entertaining.
Right. For me on that one, because I'd only been in comics here and there throughout my entire life, and then, when we decided to start this show, we actually started this show on Geekcast Radio, our flagship show of the network, because you're like, ooh, the Joker, his face, Batman 13, you need to read it. And I'm like, okay. And then that started the genesis of this podcast. So ever since 2013, late 2012, early 2013, I'm still into comics. I'm still covering comics on the show, obviously, but I'm not buying as much. I'm going to be at some point, hopefully, but because I'm going to work that into my budget kind of thing, but so I can have more stuff for the show. But yeah, so far there isn't one thing or another. Now, there have been some things with certain companies that have happened that I find are just kind of deplorable. But other than that, reading the comics, reading the material, I still very, very much enjoy. I'm not sure this question applies to you because you're not really reading stuff, but what are you reading right now, and what do you think our listeners should check out?
The only thing I've been reading are the Batman Continues, just because it kind of takes the animated series to another level.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so good. For me, there's a whole laundry list, folks. Like I mentioned earlier, Long Distance from Tom Zoller, Sex Criminals from Matt Fraction and Chip Zdarsky. Pretty much anything we've covered on this podcast, you can go back through all of our episodes, just looking at our episode titles and go pick up all of those. What character types do you like the most? Heroes, heroines, anti-heroes, heroines, or villains? What are you really drawn to when it comes to reading comics?
A character like Q from Star Trek. Kind of an anti-hero villain.
Right.
Kind of just a pain that kind of shows up, which they actually did have an IDW comic with all of the generations of the
Q-Birds?
starships. Yeah.
Yes.
They had Q in it. They had a lot of the other aliens that have those type of powers, and then they had Kirk, Picard, Cisco, and Janeway like all swapping crews and creating like this game where they're battling for Q's amusement to settle a bet. And so that was kind of my favorite type of setup. But I generally like the flawed heroes, kind of like Kirk or Picard, or they've kind of taken Prime and Megatron to a whole nother level on IDW.
Yeah, they have.
I don't know if I like Megatron going good.
It's interesting because I feel like that storytelling point is he's a character you can root for. He still has some of his evilness, but he doesn't want to take over the world. The reason why I like Megatron going good is because he himself is at peace with his own tyranny.
Okay.
Oh.
I could see it.
Yep. So this is actually a holdover from Toycast, but it's
wow, that's a blast from the past.
Yeah, well, it's a holdover from Toycast because I applied that question to comics. So back on Toycast, when we used to talk action figures and things like that, Mighty Mugs and all that, I used to ask everybody, do you have a my parents got rid of my toys story? Because I do have one. So now, do you have a my parents got rid of my comics story? I don't, because like I said before, I wasn't collecting comics as a kid.
I don't have one of those stories, but I've had to get rid of my comics on multiple occasions.
Yeah.
Because I fell on hard times and I needed the money. And it wasn't that I wanted to, because like my comics, it was always kind of like this. I don't read them often enough for it to matter, but I don't want to part with them. And so I had this instance where I was going, I had probably 2 or 3 long boxes worth over the years. I'm down to like less than half of a short box. So I had to get rid of, like, I had a G.I. Joe run and a Star Wars run and a couple of Turtles comics, a couple of X-Men, not really enough to really go on. I had a Power Rangers run, a short run of it, a short run of Spider-Man, and I got rid of all of those, like mostly because I didn't care. The G.I. Joe kind of bothered me a little bit, but that was just because I got those in the 90s. And then I started getting rid of some of the other stuff. Like I started getting rid of some of my G1 comics from Marvel. And that bothered me because I had, out of the 80 issues, I had probably 68, maybe, I had about 68 of them.
Oh, and wow.
The other issues I could not get my hands on were because they just were so rare I'd never seen them. and that was from scouring multiple comic shops in their quarter bin and their regular bin, and stuff would turn up every now and again. Like, I had all of the G2 line except for 2 comics, again for the same reason. The last issue and like one of the other issues were insanely difficult to get. But again, it was one of those scenarios, and I needed money multiple times. I was working fast food. I had no money coming in. Not to mention, I was also buying Transformers toys, and I kept getting flat tires in my truck. So, and tires on a truck, even back then, were pretty pricey.
Right.
So I kept having to take my comics, pawn them. I'd get, and it was ridiculous. Like, I'd get like $100 for them, and it was funny because I probably could still go to the one comic shop and find some of my comics there.
Yep.
And that was years ago. But I've had to do it numerous times. And then before I moved from Michigan to Colorado, I actually offed. I think that's when I got rid of my Dreamwave comics.
Right, yeah.
And a lot of the other stuff. And I was kind of sad to see him go, but I think, and I could be wrong, I think the reason I got rid of them is I think I had some of them digitally. Mm-hmm. Because I bought years ago when I had PredaconEmpire.com, I had it was from Decepticon Matrix. They had a like total dump of all of the Marvel Comics line. Somebody had ripped them all digitally. The Marvel line and the UK line, the US and UK. And I had the G2 comics on there. So I have somewhere around here a CD where all of it is on there. And so that eliminated my need for those. I think the Dreamwave stuff's on there too, and I had the Armada line and Energon line on Dreamwave too, and they were really good graphically by comparison to the TV show. But again, it was one of those scenarios I had to off them because I needed cash, and that seems to be like the story of my life. I have to get rid of stuff because I need money. So like I'm slowly replenishing some things, and you know I'm kind of weighing what I get now. But yeah, I mean that's kind of what's happened to me, and that's why I'm down to so few. But I managed to hold on to some. Even same thing happened with my DVDs. I did offed a lot of those too for the same reason.
Yep. All right. So most, and this is very, very true, most creators will say, don't ask me an idea, don't tell me your idea, because if you do, and then later I end up potentially unconsciously using that, then you could come back and sue me, kind of thing. So, like, don't go up to Brian K. Vaughan or Kyle Higgins or Jimmy Palmiotti and say, hey, this would be a great idea for you to put in your comic. And if they accidentally do, then you could, But so basically this one is, what would you do if you could create any comic storyline? What would you want to create, and what characters would you want to create it with? So if IDW gave us the keys to the Transformers Kingdom, or if DC gave us the keys to Batman, that kind of thing, what kind of comic story would you want to create with the characters that you love?
Honestly, I would probably do. It started out as a fanfic. I never got around to doing it the rest of the way, and I did script out some of it. I created a series that took place between Beast Wars and Beast Machines.
Oh, wow. Okay.
It was called Transformers Age of Dissolution because it's before the Maximals arrive, but it explains how Megatron took command of the planet by himself. Mm-hmm. So it begins with, like, you're dealing with a little Predacon faction of a up-and-coming crime lord, kind of in the sense of, like, Beast Wars Megatron. And there's a plethora of villains that I created with some licensing of similarities to some other Decepticons that were Predacons, and you come to find out that Depth Charge had, even though he was destroyed on the Beast planet, made it back to Cybertron. They put him in a new body, and he's talking to the Council of the Primes, or the Primals, and so he's talking like Leo Convoy and Big Convoy, and another one that looks kind of like Primal, and another one that's like Rodimus, or some of these other primes that are kind of sitting on this council, and he's telling them that the Beast Wars went totally out of control, and that as far as he knew, things were still going on, and they're just blowing him off, and he's like, "You morons," and it kind of leaves, and you find out that Tarantulas is also back on the planet. Same thing, like revitalized, like because of the Predacon Council, Tripredacus, and so he's opted to keep a robotic version of his Tarantulas or Tarantula form. Right. So he has drones that are in the council that are spying on the whole thing, and he kind of chuckles to himself, like, they're still trying to unravel the webs that, happen on Earth. And then these crime lords, they're going through and they're scavenging, trying to find, because they're kind of on the a rundown part of Cybertron, and Megatron crash lands on the planet as his dragon form, and so he's like damaged bad. Yep. But he's still strong enough that he could take them out if he needed to. So he's scorched and everything, and kind of comes out and decides to take command of this little squad, and in turn takes out their leader, essentially placing himself as the head. And then so they go on, and he starts working on his version of that virus that he used in Beast Wars.
Beast Machines.
Well, yes, the same one that's used in Beast Machines, but he used it on a smaller scale in Beast Wars to lock them into Beast Mode.
Oh, right. Okay.
There's an episode where he does that. Like, he does kind of lock them into a Beast Mode of sorts. And so, like, he's working on that, but amplifying it. And so it kind of locks them, reverts them into their small, or into their beast form, into their primitive forms, which essentially ruins all of the non-Predacons and Maximals, and so he's basically gone. There's a little bit of time travel involved, but he basically wipes out Cybertron. So it's kind of playing the long game of what happens between the two, up to the point where he's in his citadel, and the Maximals arrive and get shot down. So it was, I never got very far with it, but that was kind of the long game of what I'd planned to kind of bridge the gap, because there was kind of not really enough backstory of, like, how did this happen? Like, how did Waspinator get flung by the planet, and shot back to Cybertron, and, how did he become Thrust? And so, those were some of the things that I wanted to see, but it'll never happen.
Yeah. For me, God, there's so many things. I don't know, there's so many answers I could put here. Just based on what I've read from IDW's Phase 2 and with Megatron becoming an Autobot, there was a cover on one of the issues where it's Rodimus and Megatron, like, driving down a hill in their alternate modes. And I'm like, ooh, Rodimus and Megatron buddy cop story kind of thing or something. I don't know. There's another one where I wanted not necessarily like what happened in Triple Takeover, the G1 cartoon episode, but basically I wanted Astro Train and Blisswing to team up again against two, like Springer and Sandstorm or something, like two other Autobot triple changers. Like, I wanted a triple change, like, Combiner Wars this, Combiner Wars that, Gestalts and all this. I'm like, no, how about a triple changer war? That would be cool. But yeah, I leave all the creations as far as comic stories and using the characters. I leave that up to the professionals. I just love reading the stuff. All right, final question. What is the one piece of advice you would give the comics fandom?
Enjoy what you enjoy. Don't be critical. Don't harass the creators. And even if you don't like the story and you like the art, there's always something you're going to like or dislike in a comic.
Right. For me, I'm pretty much the same as what you just said, except I put it in a way where it's, well, let's see here. For me, comics is for everyone. There's room in comics for anyone and everyone. If you like horror, there's a corner of comics for that. If you like westerns, I'm sure there's a corner of comics for that. If you like superheroes, there's plenty. If you like giant robots, that's great too. Like Steve said, enjoy what you enjoy and don't focus so much on the negative kind of thing. Comics are for us all. All right, folks, that's going to do it for us here inside the Pull Bag. Would you like to be on the Origins episodes here inside the Pull Bag? Send an email to feedback@geekcastradio.com with the subject line TPB Origins Guest Spot. You must have 1 year or more of podcast experience and be over 21 years old. Yes, that was a in-podcast promo for the podcast. Yay! Don't you just love this off-the-cuff kind of... Anyway, thank you for joining us here inside... What? How?
We used to have a podcast called Off the Cuff.
Yeah, I know, right? Thank you for joining us here inside the Pull Bag. If you'd like to get in contact with us or leave feedback for the show, there are several ways to do so. Visit the website, geekcastradio.com, where you can comment on this and all of our other posts from all of our other shows, not just this one. Here are all the ways you can listen to us nowadays. Apple and Google Podcasts, Spotify, and, of course, the home where our files exist, Spreaker. Leave the show's feedback in iTunes. Please do this. Man, that's going to be interesting, checking my computer. Once my computer gets out of storage, checking those iTunes, oh boy. I can only imagine what people have said about me now. I mean, if I don't talk about myself, who will? Follow us on Twitter. @GeekCastRadio is the network Twitter. The show is @The Pull Bag. I am @TFG1Mike. What is your Twitter?
@SCP21.
Become a fan on Facebook. Go to facebook.com/GeekCastRadio Network. You can also search out the Pull Bag on Facebook as well. For now, I am TFG1Mike with
Megatron Phillips.
Make your great escape into comics, and we will catch you next time here inside the Pull Bag.
You just heard the latest episode of The Pull Bag, GCRN's comic book review podcast. There are several ways to get in touch with us and leave feedback for the show. You can visit the website, geekcastradio.com, where you can comment on the episode and all of our different podcasts. You can rate our show on iTunes. Be sure to leave us feedback. Call the voicemail line, 502-526-5821. Please remember to tell us the show you were leaving the message for and your name. Become a fan of us on Facebook by searching Geekcast Radio Network. You can send us an email, feedback@geekcastradio.com. Follow us on Twitter @GeekcastRadio. So until next time, unleash the geek in you.